Hello and welcome to BZ Listening. I'm your host, BZ Douglas. As regular listeners know, in June, I quit my job as a full-time web developer in order to start a new career in journalism. Prior to this pursuit, the podcast mostly featured grassroots musicians and artists and occasionally activists and journalists because I've always needed to talk about politics. Today, I'm interviewing members of the People's Archive of Police Violence in Cleveland. I first learned of them while covering the Black Lives Matter Cleveland Defund the Police protest on the 4th of July. There, I saw volunteer Emily Forsey speak about the importance of documenting police brutality, especially as it related to the May 30th protests in downtown Cleveland.
On May 30th, there was a 24-year-old man. His name's John Sanders. Walking down the street, away from the protest, minding his own business. A deputy, a sheriff's deputy, packed up outside one of those broken windows and shot him in the face. This cop sat there for 20 minutes, thinking about what he had just done, seeing this man leaving, and then he shot two more people. And he did the same thing, aiming for their face. The county has done everything they could to cover this case up. What we know is that stories coming to light in pictures, in recording, video, these are the things that are putting cases and bringing justice to this movement.
Today, I'm interviewing Emily along with two of the creators of the archive, Carol Steiner and Keith Wilson. We'll be discussing some of the work that they've done, why they're doing it, and how you can help. So when I interview musicians, I typically intersperse 4 or 5 songs throughout the episode. I'll be doing the same thing today, but using stories from the archive, specifically the People's Tribunal on Police Brutality, which Carol and Keith helped organize back in 2015. In those clips, you'll hear the stories of Alicia Kirkland, Brenda Bickerstaff, Clarence Jones, and Bernadette Rowland. And in the footnotes for the episode, I will include some links to follow up on where their stories have gone since these archival recordings. Please visit archivingpoliceviolence.org or on Instagram at policeviolence_CLE. If you have any documentation of police brutality, I would highly encourage you to reach out to contribute to the archive. And if you're interested in volunteering to help out maintain it, I know that would be much appreciated. We talk about that a little bit in the interview. I know I have certainly resolved to working with them as much as I can after reviewing the site thoroughly and conducting this interview. I have just a really deep appreciation for what the People's Archive is doing because, I immediately saw its value as a researcher. I'm currently working on an audio-video documentary about the Euclid PD, and it's tricky business searching for stories like the ones that they've begun to collect here with this website and this project. When I first took the leap to pursue this, my biggest initial fear, besides how the hell am I going to make a living doing this, support me on Patreon, was how to go about finding stories. And I quickly discovered that one tends to lead into the next. And the more you simply show up, the more stories you'll find. During the course of my first story, I interviewed Kareem Henton, co-founder of BLM Cleveland and previous podcast guest. And shortly after covering him at the 4th of July rally, it was actually Kareem that put me onto my current story, cataloging all of the awful that is the Euclid Police Department and the indifferent, ineffectual local government in Euclid. In the course of my research, I have binge watched about 5 seasons worth of my new favorite show to hate watch, Euclid City Council Video Archives. It's great stuff. So yeah, I love me a good archive. And with that, let's get to my interview with the good people who run this archive, the People's Archive of Police Violence. Thank you so much for listening, and now let's get on with the show.
Hi, my name's Carol Steiner. and I was a founding member of Puncture the Silence Stop Mass Incarceration in 2014 and have been working on the archive from the beginning.
Hi, I'm Keith Wilson, and I was part of the Puncture the Silence group that launched the archive in 2015. And I'll pass it along to Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Forsey. I am a law student at Cleveland Marshall, and I just joined the People's Archive of Police Violence recently.
What is there an inciting incident that that made the archive happen? Was there a particular tragedy or moment that prompted this?
The moment that prompted it was actually that we had done what we called the People's Tribunal on police brutality in Cleveland. And that was in, I think, April of 2015. And I was putting that up on like a WordPress site, all the videos. And some archivists noticed it. And they were having a convention here in Cleveland that summer. And I guess every year they have a convention, they try to do some service project. And they decided their service project would be basically to help us make our videos more professionally centralized and archived, and also to help us set up an ongoing process where we could continue collecting people's authentic stories of their negative interactions with the police in the Cleveland area. So we had this really good experience with interacting with this large group of archivists from all over the country who kind of came here. We were here for about a week and did another centralized, I shouldn't say centralized, sort of distributed collection of stories throughout the city, and that's another of the archives collections. So the way the archive is set up is that there's various collections based on either a theme or a collection site. So there's one of the collections is there's the tribunal. Another one is the collections that these archivists did with alongside of us as activists, and that one is called the Writing the Record. And so there's different collections on there. So I thought it was pretty exciting when these archivists noticed us. It's pretty unusual for activist work to get noticed like that.
One thing I might add is that Puncture the Silence began in April of 14 and initially did a lot of educational work with palm cards and movie showings and things like that about mass incarceration and police violence and discrimination and that kind of thing. And then was very instrumental in actually leading a lot of the demonstrations, like against the letting off of the cop that had killed Michael Brown on through, the rest of that year. And then in 15, we decided to do the tribunal. And actually, the archivists had asked around about community groups and heard of us and our role in the past, and then talked with us more about, they wanted to do a service project. And when they learned about the tribunal, they thought it fit with a StoryCorps kind of a model. And that's the kind of thing that it was modeled on, the part that we did with them while they were here.
Yeah, and this is, just to say, this is based on the Howard Zinn kind of more radical model of archiving, in the sense that archivists and historians have always kind of centered the story on more predominant voices, and that's kind of, I think, the story of our history, and kind of what we're facing right now in this movement overall, is that we have always been kind of indoctrinated with the stories of the predominant narratives of from from our early development all the way through in public education is we've always been told the predominant stories of American exceptionalism and white dominance and class. We've not been told the stories of class struggle or racial struggle or gender struggle. And there, in some of the founding documents of this archive, there we cite Howard Zinn's model and call to archivists and historians to highlight these narratives from these voices that are not told. And that is the main, I would say, the root focus of this project is to highlight these stories and to bring them to light, especially in what we've seen, recently, even here and I'm sure we'll get to this, but what we've seen recently is that these stories just keep getting told over and over and over again. That even in the uprisings here in Cleveland, there's after the May 30th uprising, there was lots of stories in the news about the looting and the destruction of property and things like that. But the stories that weren't getting told were the stories about police violence that we all know that was happening in the community and things like that. So that's kind of how we're answering that call of highlighting the narratives in the community that don't get told. And that's why it's called the People's Archive, because this is the place that can collect those narratives.
I feel like the main positive result is from the people who were involved. Like all of the people, we still have very close feelings and ties with the people who were involved with the tribunal. And, they're very active in demonstrations today. You'll see Alicia Kirkland out with, billboards for her son, Angelo Miller. She's reopening that case.
My name is Alicia Kirkland. My son's name was Angelo Miller. He got killed 8 years ago. Yep. It's hard for me to do this. It's been 8 years, but it seemed like the longer it is, the worse it's getting. And so he was 17 years old. He was out doing things that some kids do. We all have not did right growing up. So he broke in a car. So him and his friends got away. So Angelo comes back home, he gets his car, thinking he could go get, the radio they stole out the car. Get it. But it didn't happen like that. When he was pulling up, it was an off-duty police officer. I really don't know how this went because I was not there. But what I do know is when they told me that my son tried to run the police officer over. Every mother knows their child, the good and the bad. I knew my son didn't try to run a police officer over. So the 911 tape came out, and you heard the officer saying, one second, please. You heard the officer saying, put your hands up, put your hands up. You heard my baby say, my hands are up, I swear to God, I don't got nothing, I ain't doing nothing. All of a sudden, the phone went dead. My son's car was shot up 8 times. It don't take a rocket scientist to figure out if my son was trying to run him over, why wasn't the front windshield shot out? Why wasn't the back windshield shot out? All the shots came from the side of the car. A bullet went in, ricocheted, hit my son in the back. And, had a lawyer. The lawyer came to me. It's not about no money. What's going to happen to this police officer? That's right. The 911 tape is letting my son said, my hands are up. I swear I ain't doing nothing. I don't got nothing. But it's just a mystery. you hear your son saying his hands are up, but how did the car still move? You know, it's like if your child said my hands are up, the car gotta be stopped. You know, but as usual with the city of Cleveland, what they do when they know they are wrong, they will settle. They will settle. Me, I don't want your money. You know, I want this police officer to be charged.
That's right. What's his name?
John Lundy. So I wanted to take it to trial. Couldn't take it to trial because I didn't have $20,000 to take it to trial. So I ended up settling for the simple fact my child had 2 boys. So when his boys get older, if they want to go to college, they will be able to go to college because they have something. His kids was only 1. They have something from their father, you know, but it get worse and it get worse. Like every time you're watching the news, you know, ever since my son got killed, it seems like it's getting worse and it's getting worse, you know, and it's like you can't heal because the pain, when you see that, when I saw the young man running for his life and they shot 8 times.
Yeah.
How can a parent ever heal? I mean, somebody had asked me something before and I told them, it's like I put on a disguise because I have to go to the workforce. I have to deal with the public. I have kids and grandkids. So I have to put on the disguise because when your child is taken away from you, your life will never, ever be the same.
That's right.
Some things you can't listen to no more. Some things you can't watch no more. Some things you can't cook no more. Some things you can't eat no more. That's how sickening it is. It's the pain that we deal with. We can't explain. You know, you have to be that parent that loses that child. That's it.
I think that the movement overall has been renewed in recent months, as we all know. And so there is and I am new, so almost all of this hard work in this project has been done by Keith and Carol and everyone else. So I cannot take any of that credit at all. What the foundation is that they have laid and that others have laid, or at least from my perception, is that it was more of a academic, historical, record-keeping project to get these narratives out of the community into a place for the sake of having a record of these stories to not get lost in the communities, in households, and lost to history. I feel like the renewed movement, at least from my point of view, has kind of shifted the scope slightly in that we are now not only trying to preserve stories, but also trying to look for ways to allow the community to have a place to connect with each other. And I'll offer an example. There was a man on May 30th, John Sanders, who was shot by unfortunately by a sheriff's deputy, and he lost his eye. He was shot by not a rubber bullet, but a beanbag. And he lost his eye, and then my partner and I were shot. We're almost positive by the same deputy about 20 minutes later. And then through this Write the Record and social media and speaking at rallies and things and talking about this project, we've now had 5 other connections come forward that will help bolster that case because they were there the same day. They were different parts of that puzzle. They were 2 people that helped carry John Sanders away from the scene of the incident and 2 people that were there when he got into the ambulance. And we've actually now found a 3rd victim that was shot presumably by that same officer. So this is all through that project, and that's what happens, and that's the power in the solidarity of these stories, in putting them together and seeing what can happen, and that can bolster each other's cases. So on the website, we say that the purpose of this project is for healing and justice, and that's really what this can do. And this is kind of the justice angle, I think, for me, and I think there's real power in that, and we're seeing that kind of, and this is a good example of that.
I'd like to slightly disagree with that.
Okay.
That we here, the community activists, never wanted it to just be an academic storage spot.
Okay.
We very much wanted it to continue to be an interactive spot where people would come forward. We developed this handout, which very much stresses, please come tell your story. So from the beginning, that was a very large portion of what we wanted to do. But in truth, to agree to a certain extent, it went dormant until recently.
I think that, I think that when we teamed with the archivists, our purpose became dual. So I think that we still, as activists, had that mentality that we wanted change now. But one of the found the visionary archivist who reached out to us, his name is Jarrett Drake, and he's the one who kind of put the Howard Zinn mentality into the DNA of the archive. He sent us the seminal paper by Zinn, and I think we all read it. And he's written another paper a few years ago.
Along with Stacey Williams. It wasn't just him.
Stacey Williams, that's true. For some reason,
there's 2 of them.
I've interacted with Jarrett more, but you're right. I shouldn't forget.
But the paper is both of them.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
And that really instilled the idea that this can also have reverberating effects through history, because this paper talks about his inspiration from seeing the archivists who documented apartheid South Africa and the internment of the Japanese in World War II and the civil rights movement and the people who archived the SNCC and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So that tells me that, okay, so we're disappointed that, we're not seeing justice for the people who have shared their stories in Cleveland, but they're, as Carol pointed out, they're getting some sense of healing, but also as these archives are maintained through history, historians will pick it up and the stories can be told. And also, in this era of multiple, I don't like the term echo chambers, but people have sort of different realities that they have based on what their news sources are. I think it's useful to have some documentation of what people are actually saying on the ground. So if you have, a relative who's a Fox News devotee, and you might be able to say, well, here, why don't you take a look at this tribunal at these videos, spend 15 minutes and look at this and tell me what you think. So that sort of thing can happen. I'm not quite sure if it's happening that much, but that's the sort of thing that I think is, there's different reasons why this is a valuable project.
Well, I would say that there's, I mean, in the position that anyone volunteering with this project takes, I think you have to think of it as you're doing some really vital work, but someone else is going to have to pick up where you leave off. You know, if you're maintaining this archive, you know, and you're dealing with a community that in a realm of society that is absolutely deliberately overlooked.
And I was, I see this as kind of, you know, the movement overall is in its infancy, in a way. And we always are, right? Because this is linear and it's gone on before us. It'll go on long after we're dead. But I was talking to somebody the other day about, she is working with another group here in Cleveland, and she's working on creating a database to just track because this is information we don't have, track the records of police misconduct in the various departments that we have, because we have RTA and we have a police force at the Cleveland Clinic and at the library, and you know, all these different layers of police that there's no, within the state, within the counties, within the cities, within all these municipalities, we don't have any kind of tracking system that says these are the this is what's in their jackets when there's a misconduct, and this is when they move from, like what happened with Tamir Rice. When there is an instance of misconduct, they can move the wandering officer, right? That issue. They can move from department to department. We don't know. So she was just trying to get to the place where we're just finding out what these things are. And that, I mean, that's before we as organizers, even and activists, even try to change the law about it. And that's what I mean when I say we're in our infancy, is we're just trying to figure out what we're working with here. And I think a project like our project, the archive, is kind of part of that. It's just seeing what are we working with and then what can we do with it. So I think sometimes it can be frustrating because we're just getting all of this honestly depressing, awful information, and just like, what do we do with it? But I think that will come later. And kind of what Keith said earlier, there will be, or at least what I was thinking you were saying, there will be other people that use this work to build off of it.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I hope to be one of those people who, you know, when I find, like, when I was just going through it for researching to do priming for this, you know, this interview, I was actually like, wow, I'll never be able to take in all of this. Even if you just have people there that like know it well enough that you're available if a journalist comes and says like, hey, I'm looking for stories about this. And you're like a librarian, like, oh, well, I have all this file of awful things that happened. And just having it classified by like, these are Euclid stories, these are South Euclid stories, these are, you know, I think you guys are definitely on the right track. And as more, you know, whatever, anyone in a journalistic capacity or even just an individual citizen looking for justice, I think it's going to find a lot of value in this. Are there any stories that have really stuck with you that you're like, everybody should know this? That I know there was one or two as I was watching the People's Tribunal, especially. What's the last one? The woman who was a private detective,
Brenda Bickerstaff.
Yeah. Her testimony at the very end, I was like, "Wow, she's a closer."
Okay. Good afternoon, panel. My name is Brittany Bickerstaff. I'm a private investigator. I have an investigation business But before then, I have two stories. I'm gonna make it brief. My brother Craig Lamont Bickerstaff was murdered by police back in 2002. It's been 13 years. So when I saw the incident that happened in North Carolina, when the boy was running, pow, 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 and shot him 8 times in the back, it brought back memories because my younger brother was shot 5 times in the back. And what was amazing when I saw in North Carolina, he took his taser and brought it over and dropped it down by the guy's body. But he didn't know that the gentleman, somebody was video recording it. And I was just so happy about that.
Right.
And I'm gonna say this, my dad was a cop, my sister's a commander in Pittsburgh, and I have another relative on the force here in Cleveland. And I'm gonna tell you this, my father was on the force for 33 years and he never murdered nobody. I'm just keeping it real. He never murdered nobody. And this is not the legacy that my father, even though he's deceased, would like to have left for the community and the citizens in Cleveland and anywhere across the country. Because my father was a type of officer. If you had a problem, you could come up and talk to him. He did not have an arrogant attitude like these officers today. And I just want to say that. And I'm not just saying it because it's my dad. There are some good ones out there, but the ones that are horrible, they need to go. Now, my second story is I was out working on a case to try to get a young man out of jail. Where this particular detective, Vincent Lucarelli, was sleeping with the victim. So what he did, he put a false indictment on me back in 2012. We pulled his text messages and found out he was sleeping with the victim, not only in this case, but he had been sleeping with victims since 2009. We had 30,000 text messages. I filed a complaint, he was fired, but 2 days ago they reinstated his job. 2 days ago with Judge John D. Satula. What happened was he went through the arbitration. Arbitration gave him his job back, then the city appealed it to this judge. And the judge reinstated him 2 days ago. So I'm just letting you know, Vincent Lucarelli. And I'm going to tell you something that was so odd about this. When we were going through the court system, and we're still going through it now, my lawyer questioned him under deposition. And what he said was his boss, who was a black commander now, Dennis Hill, out of the 5th District, knew that he was texting and sleeping with these victims. So if Dennis Hill would have took care of his business back in 2012 when another lawyer called and complained about another client, I wouldn't have got indicted. See, everybody don't know the system like me. Everybody didn't know how to get out of the system like me and get an indictment out from under you and pull records and get text messages. People don't know how to do that. My clients have seen it on TV, said, Bickerstaff, we would have known how to do that. We would have known how to do that. We don't have money to do that. And we run across this every single day. And anybody that's familiar with the court system knows, if you're poor and black, you don't have nothing going. And it's sad to say, I hate to say it, but it's true. And I want you to understand too, just like this young lady said, being black is not always right. Because you have a black man who's a commander in a white shirt who's letting the detective run loose and do what he wants to do in the black community.
Okay.
But wait a minute. Dennis Hill told the public he lives on Nathaniel Avenue. He got a big house out there in Remidersville in Twinsburg. He does not live in Cleveland. So when you run into Dennis Hill, ask him this question. Do you pay attention to what your officers do in your district? And my next question is, why in the hell is he still a commander? I could be in the penitentiary right now for 5 years for nothing. 5 years for nothing. He put an intimidation case on me. For what? I'm out there doing my job. So it's just not regular citizens, it's people like me too. It happened to me. So I can speak on this. So all the marching and everything is beautiful. But just like this gentleman here, Uncle Bob, we have to take this to a next level. Man. My brother Craig, I went to visit his grave yesterday. And I said, brother, your big sister still fighting, baby. He has 2 daughters, Kenesha and Arabia, who sometimes cry out because they miss their father. They was 4 and 5 when he was murdered. They're grown now, graduated from high school, they're in college. They still hurt, and they still have hurt and pain from the loss of their dad. Now to the police, he might have been a thug, but to them, that's my dad. And to me, that's my brother. Thug is not on his birth certificate. It says Craig Lamont Bickerstaff. That's what it says.
Brenda, I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think, what's your idea of what the next level is, you and Uncle Bob?
Well, I would like to talk to Uncle Bob, and it was so glad to meet you. I read your article, and I would like to talk to you when this is over too. And don't get me wrong, through the years, I met some amazing people. I met this young lady who spoke about her son, and the young lady of Bernadette, is that your name? Bernadette, about Dan Bigler. I would like all of us to stay in touch. And we fell out of touch. We were all staying in touch. Bill knows this. We were all staying in touch. Now we have fell out of touch. I want us to all stay back in touch. Now, just like she just said not too long ago, we need some of you down here in them courtrooms to see what's really going on. Because I'm going to tell you how I got indicted. He wrote the complaint. He passed it to Alicia McDuffie. He put a sticker on there and said, well, don't indict this if you don't need to. I'm not worried about it. Then it's sitting over to Hill. Hill signed off on it without even finding out any information. Next thing I know, I'm indicted. And then when he said, the Hill knew all about what he does, you gonna tell me you're a lieutenant or commander, you don't know what's going on in your district? But I'm putting this out here because I want you to know Dennis Hill. Do not forget that name.
What is his position?
He is a commander of the 5th District on East 152nd Street. He's a black man with a white shirt. He's a black man in power. And he dogs his own people.
Yes, he does.
I've seen him before.
Reverend Lewis was saying, you may not think the politicians is held accountable. Yes, they are. Remember, I'm somebody's mother and somebody's sister. And all of these people in here are too. And if they do me like that, they'll do you like that.
Oh, that's right.
Just don't get away from that. And just remember that. Dennis Hill. Thank you.
Okay.
Carol and I have been working recently, or for the past year and a half, really, on the Coalition to Stop the Inhumanity at the county jail, and Brenda shows up to the to some of the actions that we have, and she's always she's just got this powerful way of speaking, and she's very willing to confront the people in power in ways like she does not stand on ceremony.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm very happy to hear. I didn't have much time to go like, oh, where is Brenda now? Because I came across her video very late last night. But I was like, I'm just very glad you're like, oh, she's still around, she's still kicking. Because yes, she seemed to just like, there's a fearlessness there that I'm just like, wow. That's good for you, and people need to see that because there's a lot of people who are rightfully terrified to speak up against the police.
Yeah, part of it, I think, is her. Part of it is her unique position. She is a private investigator, so she's actually very aware of the role that all these people play all the time, so she'll call them out in a minute.
Yeah, I would actually love to talk to her, even just probably get some tips on, like, getting into more of the weeds of investigating. Because I work with a lot of like public records, but I haven't gotten to that point yet where I need to really sift out some things that are deeply buried. To answer your question about a story on the archive, there's another one from the tribunal, and we keep talking about the tribunal, but I think that really is sort of the most powerful part of the archive. There's Brandon Jones's father
spoke at the tribunal, and his son had been killed just I don't know, 2
3
weeks
weeks.
earlier.
3 weeks earlier.
And that one really stuck with me. And as a matter of fact, we had a street protest in March, like the next month. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the father showed up there. I think his name was Clarence. And the knowledge that it had been that his son, who I think was about 20, had just been murdered, really makes it difficult to watch, but also just really powerful to see how strong this guy was and how much he had already processed in 3 weeks, and was able to articulate about what he felt needed to be done in the community, and just how devastated he was.
How everybody doing? I'm Clarence Jones. Brandon Jones was my son. Well, Brandon Jones, he was shot on Parkwood. Coming out of the store, he broke into the store, coming out of the store with 2 bags in his hand. Same lady that called 911 and told them that my son was breaking the store, witnessed the whole thing. She said she watched the whole thing from the time she called to the time they shot my son. So they came out the store. They grabbed a hold of him. Both of them grabbed a hold of him. She said he's talked with him 4 to 5 minutes with a gun in his throat. Talking to him. So my son would say something back to him, and the gun went off. And they dropped my son to the ground. One of them checked the pulse, told the other one there's no pulse. He called back up, then he called 911. Said they came, got my son, didn't do CPR on him on the ground, they didn't do no CPR, nothing on him. Okay, he put him in the ambulance, took him. She said that's all he did. You know what I'm saying? And I told the lady, what you did, you called the police, don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad about that. You was right. You did what you're supposed to do as a citizen of Cleveland. You did what you're supposed to do. She said, I ain't had no idea they were going to kill your son. She said, if I knew they were going to kill your son, I would have let him die away. She said, I feel bad because I feel like his death is on me. And I told you, no, his death is not on you. It's on the man that shot my son. That's who his death is on. The man who shot my son. Well, my son was shot at 2:30 in the morning. I didn't find out till 5. And when they came, this is what he told me. Your son had been shot by Cleveland police. I don't know no more. I wasn't there. I don't know nothing else. He just did. They walked off. And we called around. They said the guy that's supposed to investigate it, he was on vacation for 2 days. So we had to wait for 2 days for him to come back. And when he finally came back and somebody else came to talk to us, he came to my door and said the same thing. The son got into the police. There's a little scuffle. He did. We don't know no more. All we got to do is wait for everything to come back, and then we can tell you more. You know, this is within a year. Within a year, you went through a lot in a year. You know your kid, I know mine. Right. You talk to us well, I talk my eyes well. Yeah. They don't listen all the time. They don't. You know, they do something bad, first thing, why they do it? We don't know that. All we know is what we talk about. You see what I'm saying? And they didn't get a chance to use it. You know, he was a good kid. You know what I'm saying? And I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of things I can't do no more. Certain food. You know, for my son got killed, we went out, we did some shopping. And he got this reference pocket Popeye still sitting in my freezer. Every time I look at it, I try. I don't want nobody to touch it. You know, that's I got it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah. And my son, he been arrested before. He got a little juvenile record. He know not to fight with the police. I tell you. You know? Before he got shot, before he got shot, they tried to tow my car. It was parked on the street. Good plates on it. Tires full. Plates good. You know? My other son just bought a car, so we basically driving his car around. You know? They come and tow my car, I'm out doing something. And my son, they called me, the police out here, finna tow the car. I asked him to go out there. Asked him, can they hold up a minute? I'm finna come and move the car. I'm on my way. He said he'd go out there and talk to him. First thing the police said, get away from the car, or we're gonna take you to jail. Get back up on the sidewalk. Get away from the car. We're taking the car. Now y'all can do it. You know what I'm saying? So I tell my son, don't worry about it. You know, I make it there before he took my car. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to show my son different things. I'm out there, okay, please, officer, don't take my car. Give me 2 minutes. Let me move my car. Push it in my driveway. Nah, we ain't doing that. They should have been over there talking all crazy. What they got to do with me? I'm here, I'm bagging. You know what I'm saying? I'm pleading in front of my son, trying to show him another way. You know what I'm saying? Talk to these police officers. Maybe they're good. You know what I'm saying? They ain't want to hear shit I have to say. Excuse me. They ain't want to hear nothing I have to say. Don't worry about it. We're taking your car. Because they've talked smart to it because they're saying this. You know what I'm saying? I'm on the phone. I hear my nephew talk to the officer like, he's on the phone. He said, can you give a minute? I ain't giving you nothing. I hear the officer. My nephew, he's not arguing with the man. He's not talking crazy with the man. You know what I'm saying? So I finally pull up. I go talk to the officer. He rolled the window up. I see another car. I go talk to the other car. I'm like, man, what's up with my car? Can I get my car? Well, I'm the one that put the ticket on it. I mean, there's no ticket on my car. Where's the ticket? Well, we came over here the other day and we marked on the car. Where's the marking at? You told me the marking. He showed me the marking on the tire. The man marking on my tire was, you couldn't just put that on my tire because it's worn. You barely can see what it said. You can't even see what it really saying. You know what I'm saying? What did you write on there? You put a number, you put a date. What did you put on there? You can't even see it. You know what I'm saying? I'm pleading. I'm pleading. My son, they ain't got to bag them. They're going to take the car anyway. They're going to do what they want to do. Boy, shut up. Let me handle this. Let me do what I do. You know what I'm saying? So I told him, all right, Daddy. I'm staying out there pleading, but please, please, please don't take my car. You know, I'm talking to the lieutenant. The way we got sergeant down there in white shirt. I'm talking to him. It's out of my hand. I'm like, man, just let me move the car. You know what I'm saying? He's like, I tell you what. If you can get a tow truck here and get the car and move, you can have the car. I said, hold on, wait. Your tow truck on the way. Your tow truck was on the way before I got here. So what is he trying to do to me? What is he feeding me? This is some bullcrap you're feeding me. If I can get a tow truck here, it's going to take me 30, 45 minutes to get my tow truck here. Yours on the way. Yours going to be pulling up soon, before I can get on the phone. And sure enough, before I get on the phone, got to call my tow truck. Here comes this tow truck down the street. I said, what type of this? You know what I'm saying? The other cop was saying that, well, your son and them, they should have been out here talking all smart to the officer. I'm like, was you here when he was talking to him? Like, no, I wasn't here. He's like, I believe my officer. So it's my prayer book now? That's why it's my prayer book. I said, that's why people don't like y'all. Y'all have no compassion. Y'all have no understanding. You know what I'm saying? That's why they like us. Well, I don't.
Okay.
And with that, I said, y'all did y'all job. My car, y'all towed my car. Y'all leave my place. I'm gone. You know what I'm saying? They looking at me smiling and laughing. And I turned back. I said, it ain't no joke. It's serious. Because y'all have to tow my car. You know what I'm saying? And when I said for my son, that's why we don't like them now. I said, I feel you, man. But you ain't got to be like that towards them all the time. You know what I'm saying? I used to feel that there was good officers out here. But now today, hell no. I don't believe it. I can never look at another cop and say, he might be good.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? I can never say that. You know what I'm saying? It's just like they look at all these little black kids running around these poor neighborhoods, they all bad.
That's right.
All cops are bad.
That's right. That's right.
All these kids out here bad doing their doing.
Right.
You saying there ain't no good ones out here? Then all these cops out here killing these people, beating these people. There's no good cops. There's no good cops. And I truly believe there's no good cop because one cop will see a cop doing bad, he's not gonna step up and say, hey, you're doing bad. No, don't do that. He gonna stay, he gonna watch it. He gonna watch it. You know what I'm saying? But as I said, I feel what she said. My life ain't gonna never be the same. No. I'm hurt 8 times. Every time I look at my wife, I see her crying for my son. I hurt because she hurt. I look at my kids, I see them crying because they want their brother. That's nothing. That's another pain on me. You know what I'm saying? I'm already hurting for my son. And now I hurt because my kids hurt because they my brother though. And he was a good brother to them. He made sure they didn't get in no trouble. He made sure they did what they were supposed to do. So he had good to do. You know? He wasn't bad. And I'm not going to let nobody sit there and say, well, he shouldn't have did what he did. Right, he shouldn't have did what he did. There's a lot of things we shouldn't do that we do. I'm a grown man. I'm 42, 43 years old. I still make bad decisions.
Yes, learn from our.
You know what I'm saying? I still make bad decisions. But we learn. You know what I'm saying? My son can't learn no more. He learned all he's gonna learn.
But, the root of all this is obviously desperation. My kids aren't going to, as a white person who has enough money to feed my kids aren't going to find themselves in a situation where...
Yeah, but I had plenty of money as a kid. I didn't, my parents would pay for me to get candy bars, and I would go into stores and swipe stuff.
Me too.
It's just 'cause it was fun to get away with it or whatever, dumb nonsense. That's the thing. Yeah. I'm not gonna. I'm kind of gotten to the point where, like, looking at all this, it's like there's always that narrative, like Emily was kind of saying about, like, where the official narrative always goes, and there's always, when there's a tragic killing that does bubble up to the news, whenever there's something to be like, well, it was kind of on him for doing this or that, and I'm just done with that. I'm like, look, ultimately we're talking about this person might have been selling weed, or they shoplifted from a candy store, used a $20. They didn't deserve to die, and they didn't have to. Like, it's become very black and white for me, and I'm done with any nuance of, like, well, there's this, unless we're talking about, like, they were actively about to harm someone and there was real violence and a threat. But when it's just this, oh, they weren't a perfect person, I'm like, neither am I. You just don't know all the like, little bad things I've done over the years that if you just put those on paper, like, oh, Brian was kind of shady sometimes.
This, the 137 shots case, I don't think was part of the tribunal, but it certainly was a case here in Cleveland that was exactly what you're talking about. They accused Melissa of being a prostitute. Both of them were from the shelters, and they chased, how many departments of police chased them all across the area. And then the guy, Relo, stood up on the hood and pumped 49 shots into the windshield. That is perfectly what you're talking about. And, and what happened?
Nothing.
Just about total impunity.
Yeah, and everyone will say that, like, oh, what they brought the reaction on themselves because they ran and created this big chase. But I'm also, and the same thing kind of, I think, gets put it like as a dismissal of Luke Stewart's killing. And I don't know, for anyone who isn't listening, Luke Stewart was a man sleeping in his car in Euclid. Someone called the police because they're like, hey, there's a car on my block that I don't know, and it's just sitting there. The cops show up, they see he's sleeping in there, and according to them, they saw paraphernalia in the car, and they decided, well, we've got to, like, wake him up violently and get him out of the car. And then Luke reacted immediately like, hey, there was no flashing lights, and there were silhouettes of men in the night. So he awakens to that. They never said police. But even if he did know they were police, knowing the history of the Euclid police, part of me is just like, he probably feared for his life, like rightfully so, because of the way they would treat anyone, because he did have a background, like, he had run from the cops before and this or that. And anymore, I'm just like, well, am I going to blame someone for having a righteous fear of being killed by the cops?
Well, and also, too, I think two things have been brought up that are really important. And one is with the Brelo case, and there was just another case, too, that unfortunately her name is escaping me at this moment, but there was just another young girl that was on her way to the library in East Cleveland that was killed by a police chase, where police were chasing for like a misdemeanor or something. Police were chasing through the streets of East Cleveland at 70 miles an hour, going after someone, and lost control of their cars and hit a young girl on her way to the library and killed her. And I mean, that's similar to the Brelo case in the sense that we need to also be looking at, and this goes into deeper questions of police policy, policing policy, the question of defunding the police and digging deeper into that. But really the question of holding police accountable for just this renegade acting with complete impunity and without without any consequences, really. And I think, Carol, that was such a milestone, that case, because we really saw in Cleveland that there was just, I mean, you could, like a cowboy, stand on the hood of a car here in this city, and not, I mean, beyond just murdering a 12-year-old at point blank range near Rice, you could really, like a cowboy, just do whatever you wanted to in the city, and absolutely nothing would happen to you.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that nothing is that we really haven't seen anything. It might be too early, but we haven't seen anything with this case in East Cleveland yet.
So how do you what kind of help can you guys use, or is this, it seems like the sort of thing where someone could contribute a bit of time a week and not necessarily have to, like, well, this is what I do all the time. I'm sure you could throw yourself in that deeply, but thinking about a project like this, because I'm a web developer too, so I'm immediately looking at it like, hey, I'd love to help. There's some ideas on how the website could work a little better. So I just wanted to open that up for what kind of volunteering opportunities or other opportunities people could have. They want to help out what you're doing here.
Hey, we'll call you later about that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that actually is one of the, now that Emily's sort of lit a fire under us again, we've been having discussions about what should we do. So one of the things actually is, oh, hey, this, like we were taking a look at the website and I was thinking, oh, hey, this submission form page is not quite as inviting as I wanted it to be. And some of these fields are a little ambiguous. So we were gonna, maybe we need a web developer to help us fix that. And another angle is that our most successful collections are from times when we made a concerted effort to go out and collect stories. I've already told you about 2 instances with the tribunal and with the archivists, but we also have done things like go to the juvenile detention center and record their stories anonymously. One idea that we have is make a toolkit and have people set up a table at a protest and just advertise that they're willing to listen to their stories and teach people how to use audio equipment and stuff. So that would be soon enough. We'll have some toolkit for people who would want to volunteer to do that sort of thing. And there's some other ideas we have.
Well, along with that idea for the toolkit would be taking it to the activist organizations in town. That, some of them have very large bases. And if we could take the toolkit to their meetings and, give a demonstration, maybe play some of the archive, the tribunal or whatever, then it would get out, among the people farther. As to what it actually is, I think part of our problem is who's heard of an archive? It's not exactly an everyday word, especially if you haven't been in academia. And so I don't think people understand right off the bat what a tool this can be. But the people that have been involved definitely understand it. And I just wanted to bring up one more case that really tugged at my heartstrings, and that was Alicia Kirkland. As I reviewed things, her testimony was very brief, but it was like, when you lose your child, you're never the same again. You can't cook the same things. You can't eat the same things. It's like very vivid daily reminder that you've lost this loved one. And that always just struck me, probably as a mom, but just in general.
What has surprised me too, since really being in Cleveland and moving here and hearing all of these families of victims, is how quickly after their child has been victimized, they've been able to, and murdered, that they've been able to speak about it in this way that's like, you can tell that they already had prepared in their minds what would happen if this ever happened to them. And that is striking to me, because I don't think anyone in my family had ever thought, if Emily is killed by the police, this is how I will feel. Because I don't think that's something that anyone in my family had ever had to think about. And that has struck me several times, because these parents are devastated, of course, but they already know, they are prepared. And it's startling to see how prepared they are for this grief that they're going to have. And I thought that the other day, Carol and I were interviewed with Alicia Kirkland, and I thought that about what she said, even though it's been so long after her son was murdered. But it is striking to me.
It reminds me of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, of the letter to his son. Have you read that?
Between the World and Me, I think it's called.
Yeah, Between the World and Me. And it's sort of modeled after a letter or book that James Baldwin wrote to his nephew.
Fire Next Time.
So yeah. So the minute a black person leaves their home, their black skin is visible, and all that means.
Yeah, and that's 100% the thing that I've internalized. I mean, I think when you're closer to activism, and certainly now becoming a journalist who's like writing about police, you start feeling a little more terror about like law enforcement, and that paranoia that just comes with like, if you're challenging authority in that way, now, that puts, you can be more of a target to law enforcement for any number of reasons. But just the fact that like that terror is something like I could put it down. I can stop doing this. I can walk away. Or when I go walk, if no one knows me in a town, then no one knows that I'm an activist or a journalist. And you can't put it down when with the color of your skin. I think the other thing, like you were saying too, about the reaction of families and grief. I mean, when I think about if something like this were to happen to one of my kids, the only thing that would quell it would be speaking out and expressing my rage and having something good come of it. There's another story in the tribunal I saw last. I forget his name, but his mother came to speak. He was shot, falsely accused of stealing some jewelry, and what was his name?
Dan Ficker.
Dan Ficker, yeah, and his mother was there, and she talked about how like her and the ex-husband were like working on that together for justice or whatever, and just that it was the same thing that I'm talking about now. Is just you could just see that resolve, and like the only thing that's going to make this right, or at least that's worth anything, is to like make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else, and demanding justice for it.
Good afternoon. Just want to thank Carol for inviting us here today to give you our testimony about our son Daniel Ficker, who's pictured on the shirt, who was killed at the age of 27 on July 4th, 2011 by the Cleveland Police Department. The story starts by, let me give you a little background. My son was with his high school sweetheart for 10 years. Her name is Tiffany Urbach. They have 2 children together, and she still does live in Parma with the 2 children. On 4th of July, they were going to a family party. Tiffany's cousin is married to a Cleveland police officer. They go to the party on July 3rd in the afternoon with their children. They leave about 5 o'clock. For some reason, Tiffany's cousin does not like my son. She hasn't liked him, but they go because they're family, so they go to this party. They leave the party. They go to Tiffany's parents' house in Strongsville, finish out the rest of the July 3rd afternoon, leave the children there, and then they go home. They stop at a bar, have a drink or 2, then they go home. When they get home, there are 2 police officers from Cleveland parked in front of their house in Parma, waiting for them to get home. While they were at their parents' house, apparently some jewelry came up missing, which today we know is a lie because there was no jewelry and there was no jewelry missing. So Tiffany's cousin Kim Mindek makes a phone call to her husband Dave Mindek, who was an officer at the 4th District, and says, someone stole the jewelry from her house, and I think it was Dan. Right off the bat, didn't see him do anything, nobody saw anything, and today I can tell you there's no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing anywhere where that jewelry was supposed to be. So, what does Dave Mindek do? He leaves work, gets off work from the police department, calls his buddy from the 2nd District on a cell phone, doesn't make a police report like a normal citizen like you or I would do. He calls his buddy on his cell phone. He meets him at his house. When they get there, they disrupt the crime scene, so-called crime scene, which is not proper protocol. I mean, I could tell you 1,000 things that those 2 officers did wrong. We'd be here all day. But anyway, so Dave Mindek gets in the car with Officer Matthew Kraska. Matthew Kraska is on the clock. Dave Mindek is off the clock now. They get in their patrol car. Kraska calls his supervisor, Daly, Officer Daly was one of the officers that let one of those 63 cars go to the 137 bullets shooting. Yes, one of the same officers. So anyway, he doesn't tell him Mindek's in the car with them. He just says he's going to check something out in Parma. That's about all the information he gave Daly. So like I said, they take matters into their own hands. They go there, they wait for my son and Tiffany to arrive home at their home. No warrant, no arrest, nothing. They just want to question them. So they say, like I said, my son had a couple drinks and he was not driving, okay? Tiffany was driving the car. So of course, like you guys have said prior to me that they want to try to twist everything around and, saying that my son's driving while he was drinking. He wasn't even driving. She was driving. They pull in. The 2 officers come up to them and say, we want to talk to you. No lights on, no warrant, nothing. And Tiffany and my son, they lock arms and they say, no, we have nothing to say to you. First they said, what are you doing here? Anyway, they tried to get in their house and Officer Kraska pulls my son, unlocks his arm from Tiffany's arm, pulls him, throws him up against the police car, and pretty much starts beating him. My son is screaming for help. He's screaming to the neighbors, somebody help me, Dawn, somebody please help me. Tiffany's calling the Parma police because what is she going to do? She can't do anything. These are 2 police officers supposed to help, but they're not helping. Anyway, a fight ensues. Because my son he's not going to get beat for something he didn't do, and he knows the officers are not acting within their jurisdiction, they're not acting as police officers, so he's protecting himself and his life. They get in an altercation, they're rolling on the ground, Tiffany's trying to call the police, and within minutes, I would say, Officer Kraska was tired of fighting with my son. My son was unarmed, by the way, he had nothing on him but a pocket knife, which they took out, threw it on the ground, just a pocket knife he carried every day. And basically, he pulled out his gun, and he fired it at my son. He killed him right at his doorstep. And he was trying to get into his house. All because he was tired of fighting with my son. And Officer Mindek stood there and watched the whole thing happen and nothing. He did nothing. Anyway, of course, the grand jury doesn't indict him because it's a justifiable shooting, of course, even though my son's unarmed and doesn't have to talk to them. He doesn't have to go with them. They have no search warrant. He didn't have to do anything. His civil rights were totally and completely violated. So we have a civil suit now trying to do something to get justice somewhere, seeing that the Cuyahoga County prosecutor won't do anything. The Cleveland Police Department didn't even discipline them because they said they're waiting for the discipline until after our civil suit. How could you wait to discipline somebody until a civil suit? It's almost 4 years. Well, guess what? The 2 officers, I believe, have now since got disability retirement. They're not even working as police officers, so they will never be disciplined. So we're just looking for justice. Just real quick, my ex-husband Dennis, which is my son's father, he suffered a stroke a couple months ago. He's been in this with me from the beginning. We've been doing this together, and he's been speaking. But we had a little setback, but he's here right now. I don't want to keep him on anything. So thank you very much.
Is there anything you'd like to put out there, or any plugs for anything you're specifically trying to call out right now or get attention to, or casting a net for certain types of stories?
Yeah, I've been heading up the Instagram account, and people do write me all the time, or us on the Instagram account, and say, hey, I saw this thing. Do you guys want to know about this thing? And I always say, yes, add it to the archive. And it almost never happens. I do have a couple people that have said, can I send you an email? So I do, I have a couple narratives that way that I just need to stick in there. But I think, us working on the making it easier for people to upload things will help. But at least for me, the plug is asking people to, when they see things, when they have pictures, when they have videos, to safely, block out anyone's faces that they want to, but to reach out to us via the archive and upload those narratives, and the photos and the videos that they have would be the best thing that they can do. If they're welcome to reach out via the Instagram or the Facebook. Yeah. But sending them directly to the archive is the best thing to do.
I think defining the word, what this actually is, would be extremely helpful. Any way that can be augmented, that it's not an academic thing, that it is actually, meant to be a tool of the masses, by the masses, for justice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to tell you, that's how I approach it as a journalist, and so, I think the service you guys are doing has been excellent, and I'm really looking forward to having a separate call where I can maybe talk about some suggestions I'd have for the website, especially as a user, as a journalist too. I can think of some it'd be nice to be able to find things like this. Keith, do you have any parting words before we sign things off here?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Emily brought up about the whiteness of this podcast. I brought up Jared and Stacy's paper. They're both archivists, but they are both Black as well. We have had a lot of conversations about the racial element of what we're doing. Our archive is called the People's Archive of Police Violence in Cleveland. There's nothing explicitly about race there. And yet, I think we all know what the police are for. And it's for maintaining our system, and our system is a white supremacist one. So we are very conscious of that. The way I often think about it is I'm mostly a technician, I'm doing the work. And I'm in constant communication with both Black and white and all sorts of activists. And we have worked closely with some of the Black activist groups in the city, especially the Carl Stokes Brigade and Black on Black Crime. Black Lives Matter Cleveland actually launched right around the same time as the tribunal. So they weren't involved at all in the initial stages, but they've endorsed our archive and advertised it on their site as well. So it's a tricky thing, but we're trying to do the work that's necessary to make sure that we're held accountable, and not just running away with this with narrow perspective that white people necessarily have. So we're trying to keep our perspective as wide as possible and keep an authentic approach to the community and getting the stories that way. I do think it's important to address that. So thanks for bringing that up, Emily.
Well, and I certainly think you guys are having the right posture as far as even despite the color of your skin, it's you're listening, you're not telling. You know, as someone who's been kind of coming into the Black Lives Matter movement as a journalist, you know, and covering it, that's really been the posture I've adopted, is just like, well, I know I'm not experiencing this on a daily basis, so I'm here to take it in as deeply as I can and amplify the voices of people that are articulating it very well. So I can't thank you enough for the work you're doing, and I think did we lock up for a second? So I can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing, and I think I'll be in touch with you guys again on future stories, and hopefully doing some work alongside you. So
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks. Hello, and welcome to a new part of the show where I thank all of the awesome people who have supported me on Patreon, and I would really love it if you would become one of those people. I have not figured out yet how I'm going to make money as a journalist as far as working with an actual established place. What I'd really prefer to do is be reader supported, and that's where this pitch comes in. Anyway, besides pleading for your support and patronage, I also wanted to plug one of my very first patrons and a former guest of the show, Michael McFarland. He has designed this badassedness. See this? The hat I'm wearing? That is the Cleveland Spiders logo. He has created some apparel for it, and he is pushing it out there, trying to nudge Cleveland into going back to a much less offensive, much cooler name, honestly. There's a lot more great metaphors involved with, we're the Spiders. I mean, I might actually become a baseball watching person. Anyway, I will have a link to purchase some of this apparel, and 50% of the profits will go to the First Nations Development Institute. So good on you for that, Michael, and great work. I really hope that this becomes official, pre-official merch one day. It's pretty awesome. And so yeah, if you're a patron, I may plug your stuff. It's a very different kind of relationship I have here. I don't really gate much content, but I just don't believe in it. I think everyone should have access to this stuff. If I'm going to put it out there, I don't want to hide it. This is why I'm usually on a script, because otherwise I just keep talking, and I won't stop, and it's going to be awkward. I don't know how I'm going to end this. Maybe just I'll stop.